the Writing Center, so I spend an inordinate amount of time thinking and talking about my writing process in an effort to help other people through theirs. So the way that I like to think about writing is that it's like moving through a labyrinth. I'm at my point A and I have a sort of vague idea of what my point B is, but there's not a straight line between me and it. There are lots of twists and turns and walls in my way, and it is not an easy process. So I want all of you to do something that I do quite frequently. I want you all to picture a writer, a stereotypical writer doing some writing. Now if I'm right, which I hope I am, you have all pictured some flavor, some version of a person sitting diligently alone, transferring the thoughts in their head into words on a page with ease. And perhaps the only thing that differs in your interpretations is the mode by which they are doing the transferring. Maybe you've pictured somebody in Shakespearean garb using a quill to scratch onto a parchment, or a beatnik with thick-rimmed glasses tapping onto a typewriter, or maybe a woman sitting in a Starbucks behind her MacBook. I like to think that these three characters move through the labyrinth in different ways. In my head, the contemporary of Shakespeare walks up on a beaten path of 14 right turns and exits the labyrinth with ease and not a second thought. The beatnik is not quite sure what he's doing, but he knows he's not following the beaten path. He's moving around, milling about, not abundantly concerned with getting out of the labyrinth. And I like to think that the woman behind her MacBook in the Starbucks is methodically mapping each twist and turn and trying to better understand the labyrinth which she is in. Which is very different from my process, which usually involves sort of running blindly into the labyrinth and then, like around the end of my first draft, looking up with a little bit of terror in my eyes, wondering, not quite sure how I got where I am and with very little idea of how to move forward. So I think that people who tell you that they write in straight lines, that they are able to kind of sit down and easily transfer thoughts in their heads into words on a page are one of three things. They are like William Faulkner, and they are geniuses, and I'm really jealous of them. 2, they are deluding themselves into thinking that what they're doing is the best that they can do, and they could reach such great heights if they just looked back at their writing. Or 3, they are blatantly lying to you. Now, I think this image of writing as being something that is simple, and being something that if you have the right thoughts, that you can just do as you sit down, is, I think, maybe even more pervasive than the idea among Americans that chocolate milk comes from brown cows, and I think perhaps even more dangerous. Quick little note about my writing process. I tend to kind of forego big important things in my writing so that I can have little things that amuse me. So when I was in 10th grade, I was writing about Macbeth. I fought teeth and nail to keep the word Machiavellian in my thesis. And when I was writing this TED Talk, I moved a lot of things around so I keep my brown cow joke in there. So writing is labyrinthine, and it is not rational to think that taking the same path will get you to different ends. And I think sometimes we have this idea that we've found our path and we're not going to change it no matter what. And maybe that will get us to something that mediocrely works each time, but I think we're missing out on something great. When Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote Hamilton, the first 2 songs each took him a year to write. If he had continued at that pace, we would not be graced with the rap musical that took the world by storm until 2055. One of my friends in the Writing Center, Michaela Barnes, who gave a speech today, is one of those people who is like Faulkner, and she will sit down and write something magnificent in one go, and I'm really jealous of her. But when she writes poetry, she's looking for a fundamentally different product, and so she has a fundamentally different process. Writing also doesn't have to be something that you do in the order that you want to read it, that you want it to be read in. Vladimir Nabokov used to do something that he called dealing himself a novel. He would write on index cards scenes that he would want to have in his writing, and he would stack them mile high. And then he would select 3 or so and lay them out on the table, and then figure out a way to connect them. Another one of my fellow consultants, Alex Hartwich, does not like writing beginnings. She finds them stressful, and so she will write the middle of her essay, kind of flesh her ideas out, and then eventually work her way back to the dreaded beginning. When I am revising a draft, I tend to kind of tinker with things a little bit until I feel that most of my choices are intentional ones. Most of the things that I have done, I know why I did them, and I can feel confident in them. But one of my fellow consultants, Eberici Kimezi, and Dostoevsky, the writer of Crime and Punishment, do things a little bit differently. When Dostoevsky was writing Crime and Punishment, he was under threat of going into a debtor's prison until the moment he handed his manuscript to the publisher. And so he finished it, and then he looked back on it, and he realized that what he had done, writing it in first person, had made his main character too sympathetic. And instead of doing what I would have done, which is saying, "C'est la vie," and handing it to my publisher, he burnt his only copy and wrote it again in the third person. By my count, Eberici wrote about 14 billion drafts of her college essay. And she realized something was a little bit off, she would torch it and start again. And so the reason that I know so much about my classmates' writing processes is because I believe firmly that writing is something that is best when we do it together. And this is proved by the fact that history is littered with great writers and thinkers that came out of writing circles and writing groups, like the Bloomsbury Circle or the Algonquin Round Table. And I think that this idea that when you write and involve other people in your process, that means that you are unable to think of things yourself, I think it's fundamentally wrong. I think it just means that you are able to allow other people's perspectives to influence your writing. And perspective is all I really have when I'm consulting someone on their writing. So I'm not standing above their labyrinth looking down at them saying, all right, here, left turn here, right turn here, careful of the branch, all right, you made it, good job. I am unable to do that. I'm not perched above, I'm standing outside their labyrinth. We are on equal footing. All I can do is help you understand the decisions that led up to the point that you are at and how to help you proceed to the future in the way that you want. And so I think that when you guys all think of a writer, I want you in the future to try and think of yourselves, because all of you are writers. And I beg of you that you do not let a distaste for the process of writing stop you from saying the important things that you have to say, because they are important, and I, for one, would love to hear them.